Okay, everybody, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. I'd like to acknowledge that Trina Loomis will be arriving here shortly, but we are going to go ahead and get started without her. So the first order of business, let's consider the approval of the August 23rd, 2022 regular meeting minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
Okay. Any discussion on the minutes? None? Okay. All in favor? All right. That is unanimous. Okay. And for public comments this evening, everyone that is signed up is actually connected to the applicant, and so there will be no additional public comments with that, so we'll go ahead and jump to the first item on the agenda. We'd like to consider recommendation for the Honeycutt Brown subdivision sketch plan, which is a request by Toll Brothers Southeast to subdivide 239.37 acres.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to enter the staff report into the record. I also want to draw attention to the highlighted part of the agenda that just in terms of a background, why are we here in the old quasi-judicial fashion? And I say old, just a couple months ago, we made a change as a town. But this project was submitted prior to that. And as you know, the change process stipulates that if you're following the regulations, then staff will review. If you're looking for modifications, then you would still revert back. And so the applicants were given the option, and they decided to pursue the path that they were previously under, which is quasi-judicial. So this will be going to the board next month, as you're used to. So very quickly, I will just set the stage and go over any comments that we have, and then the applicants are here represented, and you can ask us any questions that you may have. This is a general location map. You can see that this property is located north of Gilead and generally to the east of Irvin Cook Road. There's a small portion that is on the west side as well. You can see that it is 100% zone TR, transitional residential. This is a bit of context. You can see the site plan there in the white, and then some aerial photography around the edges. I will say that Torrance, which is down in the right, the L shape, that exists. That is not a paper subdivision at this point. So basically everything around this particular site is developed. Here's just a quick synopsis: almost 240 acres. Looking at a proposal for 358 lots. That comes in at 1.5 dwelling units per acre. And the minimum amount of open space to achieve that density is 40%, and they're proposing 48%. And so the only use in here is single-family housing, as proposed. This is the overall, and the bright-colored items there you can see correspond to the chart there in the middle of the lot size in terms of 52, 62, and 72 feet of width. They're averaging just over 60 throughout the project, and the lot sizes are averaging around 7,800 square feet. These are breakdowns. You can see the match lines that break this down into 4 parts. I don't mean to belabor that, but if we need to, we can come back to each of those breakdown sheets. So I'll just move forward. This is a lot of information. I'm not going to cover it, but it really just gives you a little bit more if you want to look at any of that with regard to setbacks, with regard to some of the open space types, and other elements of the plan, so we can come back to that as needed. I want to come out to the bigger picture and talk about the 2040 plan. You can see that the striped area there to the, I apologize, the red dot looks like it migrated on me during PowerPoint fanciness, so I will make that correction. But go on the other side of the green to the left, and it's where you see the yellow with the orange striping. That is the moderate density section. And you can see the description down below, but the thing I would point out to you in the middle of that paragraph is that you're looking at a density there of 1 to 3 units per acre. This is at 1.5, so it's right there, very consistent. Single family, of course, is consistent as well. Some of the goals that are highlighted there, and again, this is not the full description that's shown in your staff report, and I'm happy to go back and elaborate on any of them if you'd like, but you can see that there are some environmental and open space goals that are achieved, land use goals, public service goals, as well as some transportation goals as well that are touched on in the 2040 plan. Now, drilling down just a little bit below the 2040 plan is the Beatties Ford Road Corridor Small Area Plan. And while it does focus primarily on the Beatties Ford Road Corridor, it did move as far east as this particular property. So you can see it there in the legends down below. Calls for it to be residential and single-family subdivision, so again, very consistent. And then there are some open space greenway opportunities, which we'll touch on in just a moment, but you can see that shown in the green on the right side of the purple dot. And then Irvin Cook Road there is also shown in the yellow, which reflects the boundaries here. This is just a transportation map, sub-map that was in the Beatties Ford plan. And you can see that the Irvin Cook Road is designated as a minor thoroughfare. And so that would anticipate improvements to that. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind for just a second. So consistency with both of those. This is a little image here that I stole from the applicants, and I believe it'll be part of their presentation, but just wanted to give you some context. I would highlight to you that the items in red are the improvements by the developer, and they can certainly go into a lot more detail. The town did require a TIA, and what you see reflects the requirements of that TIA. The staff report in Part 3 references what was called for and any additional comments that they have. I will mention to you, and I'll come back at the summary, that the improvements that are going to be needed by DOT, we do not know those at this time. Both Irvin Cook Road and Gilead are both state roads, so they will have to be followed, whatever they are. So we don't have any real concern about that per se. If there are any significant changes to the site plan that result from DOT, then we'll have to evaluate that and see if there's any backing up in the process. But the applicants can give you an update on where the input from DOT stands. My understanding as of yesterday was that it still needs to be received. So just wanted to make sure you were clear on that. Let me back up and just add one more thing, just to make sure the planning board understands too, is that Gilead Road is, these improvements are sort of frontage related, if you will. There is a project in our CIP, I believe it's 6106, and that is back toward the east. The light at Winfield, the light at Ranson, et cetera. All of that project right away is going to begin very soon. Construction will probably begin somewhere around 25. And so that project will, come online somewhere probably in the 26 range. And so if you kind of think about this project, if it were to be approved, I don't have the timeline of the applicants, and they could share that with us if you ask. But I would imagine that they would be in a 2 to 3 to 4 year range of construction. So you can see that some of the Gilead Road improvements to the east and the end of this particular project very well may coincide with regard to some road improvements that are needed on that. Yes, sir.
Can you clarify what background improvements means? Is that what you're talking about now? They've perhaps already been baked into another proposal?
Yes, and that's what I was going over, is as the TIA analyzed those improvements as already approved. They may not exist, but they're there, and so they kind of look at them that way. And then if you go to the left side of this image or to the west, that is the Vance Road improvements, and that is where where Gilead would turn and go toward Beatties Ford. And then if you continued straight, you'd be on what would be Bud Henderson. Well, now that little turn part is being abandoned, or not, it's still going to be there. But there's going to be a new signal at what is now called Vance Road, and you'll be able to turn right and go to Beatty's Ford, or continue to go straight as you have. But it's cleaning up that intersection. And Vance Road, by our thoroughfare plan, will go south. So those two bookend projects are, by the way, the Vance Road project's probably 30, 60 days away from being finished. So that's imminent, and then the Gilead Road projects I just described. So just wanted to make sure that you sort of had that context. And DOT will be evaluating similar things.
Would you like more questions now or wait to the end?
It's fine.
Okay. That road improvement is scheduled for 4 lanes, correct?
For the Gilead section,
The Gilead section?
now that, I don't want to say the wrong thing on that. And I don't know if Jack knows, but
I'm just curious if they build out this 100-foot turn lane, if that's going to need to be bumped for, because it's currently only 2 lanes.
yeah,
now.
I don't think it does, but
And it only goes to Winfield Creek, and there's a mile from Winfield Creek to Irvin, I think.
again, DOT will look at that, and if they need additional laneage, they'll bring that into bear. But and I can get that answer for you as to what the plan calls for. I just don't have that here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. This is just the words, the verbiage way of describing what I just showed you. As a reference document, this is the report from CMS, just indicating that they would anticipate 183 students coming from this development. And then you can see how that would affect the schools that would be served. So again, this is not in our ordinance. It is just a reference document as a policy guide. So with all of that said, the parts of the analysis that we would conclude is the application is complete. We would look to find it applicable to the requirements in our ordinances with the following elements addressed. There are 3 modification requests. One is for Road H from the section F to K, exceeds the major subdivision standard of 850 feet, but it also has a creek crossing. And so we would suggest that a modification is appropriate to make sure that connectivity is maintained in the subdivision. And we can certainly go back to the site plan if you'd like. The second modification request is also for H, but it's from the section of Road G to Road M, and the same criteria would be at play there. And then the third is that there is really only one cul-de-sac in the development, and that would be O. It also has a creek crossing. And so in order for it to get across and move, it exceeds the cul-de-sac length, which is not 850. It is 350, but it exceeds that. So we are, staff is comfortable supporting all 3 of those for the environmental constraint rationale. Was there a question about that?
Yeah, I have a question, David, thank you. The third item, the cul-de-sac Road O, when you and I discussed this earlier this afternoon, that's, in actuality, correct me if I'm wrong, that is Road O from Road F to the cul-de-sac, correct?
I think I went the wrong way. No, it's I'll have to find that chart. I'm sorry, and restate your question?
Well, it's really a comment, not a, well, I guess it is a question. Versus cul-de-sac, the wording for that third modification should be Road O from Road F to cul-de-sac for 1,370 feet. As we discussed this afternoon, and the block modification on the sketch plan, it had several additions that,
If I understand what you're indicating is you're saying that the cul-de-sac begins at F and goes to its terminus, and that is correct, but Road O, as it's labeled, defines the same space. So whatever you're comfortable with will work.
okay.
But I think there is no other O, so it is just the cul-de-sac.
I'll just make a comment now. I was going to save it towards the end. I believe that block modification in the sketch plan needs to be cleaned up. So, because if you look at it, it lists other roads that, in our discussion, you said were included within fact in another section, because the requirement is anything over 800, and there were 5 or 6 roads listed on the block modification that were over 800 feet.
What I believe the applicants were looking to do, which were from comments that were made, was to illustrate, instead of the entirety of a section exceeding the standard, which was true, they were breaking down from a road intersection to a creek, for instance, and then they would jump on the other side of the creek and finish that leg, trying to illustrate that these two parts were less than the large, but in some instances, those halves still exceeded the standard. But I'm probably making this overly complicated in terms of explaining that, and they will not be included in the final version of the plan because they won't be necessary if the modifications are to be granted by the board.
So those will
That
be,
is, we're not presupposing that, but we are supportive of the modifications in totality as they exist on the plan.
so those will be removed prior to going to the town board?
If the modifications are granted, yes, they would be.
Okay.
Okay?
But I have some other questions, but that's on block modification. That was my question.
Okay. Going back to the recommendation. So those are the modifications, and again, all 3 are supported by staff. There's 2 urban open spaces. They're located, they're labeled B and E, and they are the green spaces that are located there in the small block, not the large one with the wetland in the middle, but the lower one. They were designated as a certain type from our ordinance, and it is staff's opinion that they were not qualifying as that. They may be able to qualify as a different type, but I spoke with the applicants yesterday, and I think that whether it's in this general location or anywhere else, they have the ability to provide something. The issue in question is the upper right lots of this particular image are beyond the quarter mile of urban open space. Now, I want to make sure that it's clear that there is a lot of urban open space in this project, and this is not the end-all be-all for this project. It is a series that they're providing that are going to keep every lot in compliance. And furthermore, there will eventually be a county greenway running in the floodplain just to the right of this image that will run between this particular project and Winfield. Now, it does not exist, so we can't count it, but it is funded, and it is there, and it's coming. And in fact, I got an update today that project is ready to begin any day. So it should be there relatively quickly in the larger picture of things. So I guess the conclusion of that is that we feel that in working with staff, we can get into compliance 100% with their urban open space. And if you have any questions on that, we can talk about that in a second. There is the western property. It did not include any rough grading in the site plan sheets, and so we need to see that from an environmental standpoint, from an engineering review standpoint, and again, the indication from the applicants is they'll provide that as well. I've already mentioned the DOT comments that need to be addressed, and I'm not going to belabor that. There was a comment there, the bullet about the BMP embankments and easements. Some of them were really close to some of the stream buffers, so we wanted to make sure that they were reassessed and pulled back as best they could, but they must stay out. So just enhancing that. And then any of the miscellaneous comments that the town engineering and transportation group, as well as the planning comments that would exist, need to be addressed. With all of that said, staff would recommend approval, conditioned upon those issues being addressed. Any questions of myself before the applicants come forward?
I do, David. And it concerns Irvin Cook Road and Oliver Hager Road. I know that there are plans in the works, date unknown to myself, of connecting those two roads so that there is access from Gilead Road to Highway 73 and vice versa. And I'm sure that would provide the improvements that those roads need. Can you provide any insight of where that's at, or?
Well, I mean, I can kind of give you the category of where they are. If this project were to be approved, you can see the frontage conditions of Irvin Cook that would be improved by the applicant. If you go towards 73, which would be the upper third, roughly, of this particular route, there is a project called Whitaker Point, which was processed as Cook Farm, and they are ready to break ground and get going. And they'll be providing a section of this particular minor thoroughfare. So that'll just leave the middle. And that's primarily a portion of the Irvin Cook Road that includes the section that's not paved, that I believe has a gate on in part of it. So it's starting to shrink the amount of that minor thoroughfare that would need to be improved. But there's no plan. It could enter into the CIP conversation at any point, but all of this progress is certainly helping to create that connection from 73 to Gilead.
I didn't go back and check the budget, so currently that the town portion for improvement is not in the current CIP.
That's correct.
All right.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, the parcel that's to the west of Irvin Cook, it said something about just green space, potential greenway. I didn't really see how that's possible since it seems like the greenway's on the east side of this development. I mean, what is that supposed to be? Is it going to be a park, or are you just going to grade it and seed it?
On the extreme western edge of this project, there's another creek. And our Greenway Master Plan calls for that, there to be a greenway through there. So it would go up toward Gilead Ridge, and I believe it ultimately will go into the county park, the future county park, which is immediately to the north, and then would connect somewhere else, maybe toward Blythe Landing. I apologize for not knowing specifically. But the applicants are looking to dedicate their portion of that creek area, so that is something that would be expected. And then they do not have need, and I'll let them speak to their own plans, but they are just looking to create flat open space for that western parcel.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Okay.
I believe the staff report mentioned that originally I guess the town had wanted the development to connect to the park, the future park, but the applicant isn't for that?
No, the applicant, I will let them speak for themselves, but I
Sure.
think it's safe to say they are fine
Oh,
with the
okay.
connection.
The park.
Mecklenburg County does not
Gotcha.
want the connection.
And I'm guessing lots of parks have fences around. I mean, have they expressed why they didn't want the connectivity?
Again, I will not, I don't feel like I can give you the de facto answer, but they have created some draft plans. It is an intense park in this particular area. It'll have a lot of ball fields and active spaces. I don't know if they view this road as impinging on that layout or if they have other reason. But we provided this site plan to them, and their feedback that came back was they would rather not have that connection.
And I can ask the applicant as well, but even a trailway, or is that an option?
No, the trails are still there.
Okay.
They would not go away, and the county is fine with that.
Okay.
In fact, I believe there's at least two. So these residents will be able to get into the park, pedestrian or bike, but not vehicular. So the connectivity policies that we have, of course, would still be out there, but I'm passing along the direct input we received.
I have two questions for you, and one will just piggyback right on that. So recently, the town board had another ruling where, of course, a connection was required, and against ordinance, it was overturned, and so the neighborhood did not have to connect. And it was both the applicant did not want to do it, and the neighboring parcel did not want to do it. And it ended up not happening. In this scenario, we have the neighboring parcel, which just happens to be Mecklenburg County, not wanting to do it. Do we not have to follow through with the stub, no matter what, based on town ordinance?
Well, the distinction that I would make sure that we're all aware of is that in that neighborhood that you're referencing, there was an existing stub. There was a public street. And so for the new development to connect to a stub that's ready to go was not in debate, in our opinion. In this particular instance, there is no street that exists. This would
Oh,
just-
so because the stub is not
This
there
is creating
currently.
just a stub for a future connection.
Right.
And the property owner is indicating that they would.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that.
It's not quite apples to oranges, but connectivity is still there.
Gotcha. The other question I had was regarding the modified block lengths, and so they're all tied to creek crossings. What, I may have missed it, but what is it that's happening there that staff feels comfortable with that would essentially slow people down? What is it about crossing that, you know, because isn't that what we typically look for is if we do a block length modification, that there's something, some natural feature or some sort of feature built in that kind of acts as a slowdown. Once in a while, we'll put in a table, that type of thing. What is it about these crossings that applies?
Well, it's the fact that they have to get over them that gives them
Yeah.
an amount or a percentage of roadway that they can't shrink that what's needed to cross.
Sure.
So in other words, to say, okay, we'll just make it a smaller loop and comply. But they can't do that because of the constraint of what it takes to cross in a proper way, a permittable way. The very first version of this plan, just to give you an example of the northeast loop, they actually had two cul-de-sacs that literally touched. And that is certainly not something that our ordinance and our policies want to see. And so we encourage them to eliminate both of those cul-de-sacs and connect them for pedestrian connections and all of that fun stuff. And so they were looking to do that, but when they did that, it elongated that loop.
Yeah.
And so we didn't, you know, we certainly didn't feel like it was a fair situation to say, here's a better situation and you're gonna get penalized for it.
Right.
Is it true that a road could stop or be designed in a different way that you know, to comply? I mean, that is true. But when you've got this, as much open space as they do, and as much respect for the floodplain and the natural environment as they have demonstrated, we felt like the way that the road moved through. And another thing too, as you'll see, is the roads are very curvilinear. There really aren't a lot of straight ways. They may still have to install some traffic calming techniques, maybe some mini circles or something else. And we would get to that if it goes to the next level.
Okay.
So this is not, you know, we're done. It's just we found the lengths, and the lengths weren't tremendously larger than the maximums.
Yeah.
They weren't able to comply.
Okay. And the lengths are completely understandable. You answered it with there may be traffic calming stuff that would have to be applied down the road. And that's what I thought I had missed here. So we're good. Thank you.
Just for clarification, on the one that says H from G to M, is M not the stub that they're getting rid of up there at the top?
Now you're making me think. Do you guys remember?
So if they're getting, I mean, it just needs to say we're okay with it from G all the way to K, I guess, all the way around that curve.
If the request of the county is honored by the board,
Right.
and I'm not presupposing what you will recommend either, but if it is eliminated, then their intersection will have to move to the next one.
Right, yeah,
And that'll increase the number, but we would still, for the same rationale, be okay with it.
okay. Yeah, and then it's in the curve, so, yeah.
Okay, any other questions for staff? All right, questions for the applicants?
Yes.
Go for it.
With the staff.
And I would say that I believe they have a couple of slides I'd like to share. So can we, if you'd like to have them do that,
Please, by all means.
you'll come up and identify yourselves, and I'll get you to your slides.
Name and address for the record, and feel free to take it away.
Right. Good, okay. Good evening. Thank you. My name is Matthew Levesque with ESP Associates, 3475 Lakemont Boulevard in Fort Mill. So I do appreciate your time this evening, and David did a fantastic job summarizing everything, so we're going to try not to be redundant, but just to introduce the team here today to help answer any questions you may have. Jamie Poe with Toll Brothers is here. Chad Martin was not able to join this evening. We were not aware of that when we made this slide, so apologize. But Dan Brewer, civil engineer, myself, and then Larry Mazzella. And then as well, if you do have traffic questions on the study that was done, we do have Chase Smith with Remy Kemp here. So hopefully help answer any questions you may have. But, like I said, I'll try not to be too redundant, but I'll help. Some of the questions I did hear that I can address, I'll go ahead and address those as part of this. But what you see here is just our color rendered illustrative plan. As mentioned, it was summarized. It's looking to stay under the existing zoning, the TR, the 1.5 units per acre. As you can see, we are exceeding the open space, 40% required. We're looking at 48, as well as a tree save, 35% of them, and we're looking at 58%. The green area to the left, the open space area west of Irvin Cook Road, as you can see, there's some challenges there. There's some topography on that parcel. There's a stream, there's a future greenway. Then we do have Irvin Cook Road, and then the street yard buffers that are associated with that and the street trees. So there really isn't a lot of room to do, to go in and do lots or homes. And so what we felt was a better benefit was, since we know there's going to be greenway and some active space there for recreation type stuff with that greenway, maybe we keep it as a nice green area. And it'll be, the roads will be improved around it, the frontage will be improved, it'll be maintained by the HOA, so it'll be a nice looking space. Also on I feel like this is a good slide to address quickly those block lengths that were mentioned. On the road at the top left, where we do have that stub road to the park, as you can see, getting access, we have a large pond there and wetlands and some of those wetlands fingers associated with it. So it's very limited in terms of getting access around there without doing cul-de-sacs to limit some of that road length. So that was, it's been actually probably years of working with staff over different plans of kind of going through road networks and locations. So there's been a lot of thought, a lot of versions of this plan, a lot of coordination and teamwork in terms of coming up with what makes the most sense. And then the same situation on the eastern side of the top right, as you can see that bigger loop. There's a floodplain there to the right as well, the greenway, and then you can see the large wetland is that grouping of trees in between those lots. So really limited us there. We didn't want to impact some of the natural environmental features there, so we limited impacts there and tried to create a meandering street through there. It will create a very nice feature for the backyards of those homes and some street areas, so we're excited about that. So we feel really, really good about the way the plan ended up and the curvilinear streets and how it all flows. So so hopefully that helped answer some of those reasons. This is just a plan that you've seen just to see how the two relate. It's the plan that's in the submittal packet. Traffic improvements that were mentioned, Dave did a great job summarizing those. I'm not going to be redundant, but these are the two slides that were utilized there. And then we do have some versions of the elevations and some of the architectural character that we're going to go through tonight with Jamie's going to go over those real quick and give you just a quick update and a rundown on Toll Brothers themselves.
Thanks, Matt. Jamie Poe with Toll Brothers, 307 West Tremont Avenue. So I thought I'd spend just a second here introducing Toll Brothers, because we're not new to Charlotte, but we're new to the Huntersville market. Toll Brothers is a public company. We're a Fortune 500 company. We operate in 50 markets around the U.S., do about 10,000, 11,000 homes a year in various markets. And we're the only luxury home builder that's publicly listed. So our price points are the highest of any publicly traded company. We average close to $1 million a year per home nationwide, and that varies across markets. We've been in the Charlotte market for over 25 years, have been a relatively small builder by standards of some of the larger competitors that we have here in the marketplace, but our focus has historically been in South Charlotte area, South Mecklenburg County, Weddington, Union County, Lancaster, et cetera. But over the last several years, we have been looking to expand into various parts of northern Charlotte, where we see a lot of opportunity for growth, et cetera. We have been working with the family on this project for a number of years, and really excited about the concept that was shown here, the sketch plan. That's had many iterations, and a lot of work by the team that represents us here in the marketplace. And we think we've come up with a great plan to not only create a wonderful community for our ultimate home buyers and residents of the community, but also for the town of Huntersville as well. This is just a few renditions of some of the floor plans that we offer in the market today. And I just thought I'd just point out a few things, because the marketing pictures don't always really represent the quality of the homes. We haven't set our pricing for this community exactly yet, and obviously the economy will ebb and flow over the next few years. Time frames, I think somebody asked, when does this community come to life, and how does it evolve over the next few years? If we run through all of our approvals and engineering, our hope is to start construction in the community, development of all the horizontal infrastructure next year, in the summer, maybe early fall of next year. That'll probably take about a year. Then we start the vertical construction of our models and open the community up. That usually takes another 9 months or so. So we're really looking at 2025 to have our first residents in this community. And so these plans are plans that we have today, but we evolve over the years as we learn more preferences in the marketplace. We make tweaks to our product, et cetera. But I just wanted to point out a few things. All of our homes have covered porches, a lot of different design features to try to bring some difference throughout the community. You can see some of the details there in the metal awnings and the dormers, et cetera. One of the things that we do, and we're very, very meticulous about this, is we make sure that we don't build two of the same homes within a 4 radius around each home, so that when you develop out an entire community, it doesn't look and feel the same as you drive through it. We also have different color schemes as well with our plans, and we make sure that we don't allow buyers to have the same color scheme if there's homes next to each other or in front of each other, et cetera. So when our communities build out, they have a really nice character to them, and you can see that through many of the communities that we've finished over the years. The other, I guess, interesting detail as far as this is concerned would be the size of the homes. We have 3 different lot types, as you saw in the sketch plan with the multicolored sketch plan. One of the nice things that we did, and this was a request of the planning department, was to intermix our floor plans. You look at a lot of communities today, and you'll have a section that are the smaller lots, and a section that are the middle-sized lots, and a section that are the larger lots. And over time, that creates some segregation within communities. But with this plan, you'll see that there's a lot of intermingling of different lot types. And usually with lot types comes different price points as well, in terms of the size of home that we can have and et cetera. But our range of square footages here will be around 2,700 and go north of 4,000 square feet. 3 to 5 bedrooms, a lot of outdoor living. As you can see in the floor plan, there's a lot of open space, a lot of homes that will back up to some of the edge there with all of the tree canopy and et cetera. And so there'll be a lot of privacy and opportunity for us to bring a lot of outdoor living to the community as well. Talked a little bit about connectivity. Connectivity for us is very important. Every community that we design, we try to create open space connectivity opportunity for residents to connect in the community and the outdoors. And really excited that this one is unique because it offers the connection to the future county park to the north, and then the forthcoming greenway off to the east as well. So residents would have access into those areas as part of the community, as well as having their own amenity within the project as well that would have a pool and a cabana and some either tennis or pickleball courts and a tot lot, et cetera. So we're still working on those final elements and what that design would look like, but really try to bring some character to the community and create a luxury upscale community, but still offer some broader price points for the marketplace as well. So with that, I know there were a lot of questions. I think we were just going to open it up to questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Frank, you want to kick it off?
This is really for the staff and the applicant. David, could you put the slide back up that showed all the outstanding items remaining? There you go. So my question is, has any of this been resolved? My impression right now is that no, but I'm just checking. Has any of that been resolved as of this moment?
I'll let the applicant speak, but we have discussed all of it verbally. I think we're in pretty good shape, but go ahead.
Yes, yeah, we've had conversations with staff. We don't see any issues. We've actually sent over some alternative design ideas on some of the open space areas, as well as we've already made the changes on some of the labeling with block modifications.
So for the moment, this still stands, but it's moving forward.
They are willing to comply is what I'm gathering.
Right.
Yes.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, I have a motion, but I can wait.
Go for it.
All right. Question? All right. In considering the Honeycutt Brown subdivision sketch plan, the planning board finds the application is complete. The Honeycutt Brown subdivision sketch plan is consistent with adopted public plans and policy and complies with all applicable requirements of the zoning ordinance, the Huntersville 24 Community Plan, and the Beatties Ford Small Area Plan has stated within the finding of facts in Part 2 through 4 of the staff report. Specifically, the proposed Honeycutt Brown subdivision lies within the 2040 Community Plan, moderate density and open space future land use character area, and is supported by policies LU 12.3, EOS 4.3, EOS 8.2, EOS 8.3, EOS 10.1, PS 8.1, T 3.1, T 3.2, and T 5.3. Based upon these findings, the Planning Board recommends approval. The Planning Board also recommends approval of the requested block length modifications. Road H from Road F to Road K, not to exceed 1,779.61 linear feet. Road H from Road G to Road M, not to exceed 1,184.23 linear feet. Road O from Road F to cul-de-sac, not to exceed 1,370 linear feet. The recommendation is contingent upon approval of the Water Quality Concept Plan, working with staff to provide acceptable open space types for urban open spaces B and E, providing staff with a rough grading plan for the parcels west of Irwin Cook Road, addressing all outstanding town transportation comments as outlined in Part 3 of the staff report, providing and addressing all North Carolina DOT comments as applicable, B&P embankments being kept out of the stream buffers, and addressing all remaining red line comments with staff. That's all.
All right, thank you, Frank. Do I have a second? Second. All right, any discussion?
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The cap on Road H from G to M, do believe that M is the stub to the county property. If M is removed, then that number may increase.
Well, I need to know where it goes to and what that number would be. Or is that something that's going to be?
Could you reference the next intersection as the cap? Which would be K. Which would be K.
So Road K? And what's the linear feet on that?
I couldn't tell you that, but it's pretty definitive.
Okay.
G to K. Is that what's
Well,
being said?
Well, we can,
I believe that adds another, if I'm reading this correctly, 674.3 feet.
I'm not going to state the linear feet here, David, but find the correct linear feet to go to that. Now, you say it's 600?
If I'm reading this correctly, that adds an additional.
All right, so that'd be
674.
1,784.23 linear feet then.
Would you want to adjust your motion to just state the roads,
No,
knowing that the,
no. I'm going to state the linear feet too. That's what we've always done that in the past.
okay, any other discussion on that?
Well, I have a comments that I went through this. I would ask that the staff, when they take this to the town board, that in the past, when we had, when there were block modifications, we always had a graphic that showed where that location was and the distance versus having to go dig it out of the sketch plan. Do you remember what I'm talking about? When we had done block modifications in the past, there would have been a graphic in the staff report that showed where that block modification was being applied for. I think that would help the town staff understand better what the requests are for the modifications and the distances added into the staff report.
Yeah, I got just shy of 1,900. Is that what you guys
I got 1,784.23. Well, I'm not going to tie them to a specific one on that. That's going to have to be calculated. I'm still good with it.
I just put a cap on it.
Well, so you want the block,
No more than 1,900, no, I'll cap it to say no more than 1,900, 1,900 linear feet. Would that take care of that, David?
I understand your motion.
Okay.
Scott?
I'm in support of the motion, but just going back to the western portion, I call it the orphan piece there. So obviously, they can never come back and develop that, right? It would be part of the homeowner association, it'll be deeded to the homeowner association, is that correct? Sorry, you probably can't hear.
Well, I mean, again, they can state their intention, but, so there's no lotting. They could do one home after the fact, but to subdivide would have to come back.
Is that not part of the approval process for this? Is that orphan piece not subject to this whole site plan, correct?
It is, and as such, you would, the HOA would have all of that, but again, the odds of being able to get the requisite property owners to consent, it's just not really likely.
Goes back to my original question again, that will be deeded to the HOA. It will not be kept separate for toll.
Yes, we're going to have all the development of the homes on the eastern side. The western side will be a deeded HOA maintained common open.
Gotcha, that will be maintained and deeded by the. Did y'all pursue anything? Is there a better use for it? I guess it does look like it's pretty challenging topo to dedicate it for a park or anything. I mean, I love the idea that it'll remain open space. I didn't know if there could be a more active use for it.
Dan Brewer, civil engineer with ESP. That side of the site had the best backfill soil for the project, and that area has the best soil to use. So that's
So it'll be a borrow for the,
it would be a borrow. Yeah.
okay. And then, so again, that'll be relatively flat when it's done and seeded.
It would be flatter than it is now and more usable for like ball fields or just, fields for dog runs and stuff like that.
But again, any of those uses would have to have the HOA do it after the fact because you guys are not proposing that, correct?
It would be part of the package for the open space, yes. That would be developed afterwards, after the construction.
And Mr. Brewer, if I could, just state your address for the record.
526 Woodbury Drive, Mooresville, North Carolina.
Thanks, sir. Okay. Any other discussion? All right, let's take a vote. All in favor? That looks unanimous. Any opposed? Did I miss? All right, we're good. All right, thank you all. All right, next item on the agenda, consider recommendation for petition TA 22-10, which is a request by the Huntersville Planning Department. Nathan, go for it.
All right. Good evening. I will submit my staff report into the record and then get started. So we are proposing to amend Article 8.2. It currently states only one principal building and its customary accessory buildings may be erected on any lot, except that multiple buildings which, taken together, compose a single principal use may be erected on a single lot as permitted by the district regulations and described by building and lot type. Requirements of subdivision ordinance section 6.8 still apply, and we are proposing to add one extra sentence, which reads, "The multiple building exception shall not apply to single-family homes and duplex house types that are not a part of a retirement community or congregate care facility." Planning staff recommends approval based on the amendment being consistent with policy LU 11 of the 2040 Huntersville Community Plan. We believe it's reasonable and in the public interest to amend the zoning ordinance as it'll protect the unique character of the existing housing stock. The main purpose of this is to create equity between for sale and for rent subdivisions so that they both have to meet the same standards. And this ordinance would be consistent with our existing definition of single-family home. It'll also provide options for future transactions on the land, and is similar to surrounding communities' ordinances as well. And this was approved by the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board on a 7-to-1 recommendation. And if you guys have any other questions, I can answer those for you.
The one dissenting vote on the ordinance, do you know why why it wasn't unanimous?
I'll let Jack speak to that.
Kind of to paraphrase, the person who felt like this was an over-regulation, that the town didn't have to create a regulation to create lots, that they didn't need it. That's why. The other 7 saw the rationale that staff had and recommended approval.
I have a follow-up question. I know this was also talked at public hearing. Why are we carving out the retirement community and congregate care?
Well, we added it in because of several existing retirement communities and congregate care facilities. It's definitely something that we can look at to remove if that's what the board wishes. But we did leave it in there because there are several existing facilities.
But even there, they're existing. It's not like they'd have to go back and bring them into compliance, right? They would still be grandfathered in.
Correct.
And I don't necessarily have a strong feeling either way. I'm just trying to understand why we're being specific, that's all. Okay.
Oh. You go.
Yeah, a couple questions. I'm kind of struggling with this one myself. When you say the character of the housing stock is being protected, I'm not sure what that means. Like, is it like a type of product, or is it?
No, so what brought this text amendment forward was the recent Hamlet rental subdivision. And by allowing a subdivision to be created without lots, they can get around some of our zoning and subdivision ordinance requirements. And by proposing this, it's bringing both for rent and for sale subdivisions on the same level playing field, so they both have to they both have to go by the same requirements. If that answers your question.
Yeah. Like, for example, and I'm thinking, you know, what would it look like, or how would it be different, you know, if you have, you know, like the one that was just approved? What would be different? Obviously, you got public streets, the lot lines are missing, you know, you would have public utilities.
So
You know,
here is the subdivision that
Yeah.
that you're referring to. What is different is they put all of their parking on public infrastructure, on public streets. That's something that you're not going to find in a normal subdivision process where they're required to have parking in a garage or on a driveway.
Right.
You're also going to find lots here that are much, or not as wide as the current recommendation of 50 feet. I believe most of these are in the 30 to 40 feet range. If you have anything to add.
So I'd like to go ahead and add to that. So on this site plan, there are some little parking areas on there, okay? So those are part of the development, but most all of the streets, that's what the on-street parking is. So they're all parking on public streets. That's the difference would be, as Nathan mentioned, what the law says is when your lot's less than 50 feet wide, you need to have rear access. Okay, so every lot then, because these, when you add, if there were lot lines in here, these things would be like 35 feet wide. Well, then there'd be rear access. And so that would take the burden off the public infrastructure and put it on the property, and also treat them exactly the same as their neighbor. And it's that simple concept of treating everybody the same with single-family homes, why we said that it's consistent with protecting the character of the area.
So like, you know, I was listening to I think it was town board meeting and the ordinance advisory board meeting, there's a comment about, you know, if a developer were to go bankrupt. Which, and I know the question was asked, are we treating apartments the same way as we're treating this? Are there other mechanisms, like from a planning standpoint, we could consider? For example, like if they had to have garages, or if they had to have, you know, a certain space between the homes, if that would solve the problem. I'm just thinking out loud here while I'm looking at this, because I'm struggling as to why, but I understand, you know, what you're saying here with the parking.
Right, they would have to have rear access. So, you know, I mean, all I can say is I think our comments are transparent. It's the same as a single-family definition. It's matching it up, which single-family definition is you're on your own lot. It treats all the single-family subdivisions the same, whether it's for rent or for sale. To answer your question, there's no other thing that we can think of that does it more directly than what we're doing here. It's the cleanest way to address the issue.
Okay.
So how would that affect the cost? Would adding those accesses in the back, it would drive up the cost, correct?
Possibly, but the streets get smaller. So you don't have to have the on-street parking like you do now. So now your on-street parking is wider. Well, that's a cost. So if you were to ask me what's the cost going to be, I couldn't tell you directly. It certainly could cost more. Yes. It's
I mean, my concern is that that cost then gets passed on, and if we're talking about apartments, I mean, not every apartment in Huntersville needs to be a luxury apartment.
So again, these are single-family dwellings. So when we use the term apartment, we're talking about 3 or more units under one roof. So that's, when we use that term, I just want to be clear, we're talking about 3 or more units under one roof. I bet any subdivision that you live in, there's a number of homes being rented in your subdivision. I guarantee it. I know it's the case. In this case, we're going to treat this the same as those rental communities. There are going to be lot lines. There's going to be rear access if necessary, if it's tight. If it's not as tight, then they can have on-street parking. I will also say, when it comes to cost and development flexibility, and I'll let Jay Henson, if he wants to add into it, I think Huntersville is one of the most unique places, and I've been in this business for 42 years. Yeah, 42 years. In Huntersville, in our kind of core, the I-77-115, your residential, we have no minimum lot size. We have no minimum lot width. We allow up to 30% units attached without having to rezone it to some kind of multifamily. And I defy anybody to find another community that has that kind of flexibility built in. So I do understand concerns about costs. I would just submit that for the last 26 years, the town of Huntersville, in my opinion, has provided the flexibility for the development community to do things that they just can't do in other communities. Just about every community I can think of has a minimum lot size, a minimum lot width, and when you start to go to attached houses, then you got to rezone it to some kind of multifamily type development. So that would be my response to the affordable housing comment.
Just to clarify, so just, is it a fair statement to say that the hamlet essentially took advantage of the loophole to design an otherwise non-compliant single-family neighborhood by not subdividing it, and this closes that loophole?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to say they found a loophole, but let's just say they identified something we think needs to be addressed. So you can call it any way you want. I will also say we have talked to some folks who were exploring single-family rental communities, and they had individual lot lines. So it's not like this is the only way to do rental housing. Some of them came in the door and were going to do individual house lots, and we were going to treat them the same as everybody else. So, yes.
I'll say it a little bit nicer. We want to hold rental communities to the same standard as owned communities.
Yes, sir, that would be correct.
And just to add what Stephen was saying, I would, instead of going back, instead of saying the applicant found a loophole, I think after the fact, the town found a loophole that it wanted to close up. Because we're dealing with a new, unique concept in the U.S. This company that built this set was building 14 and was in the process of building 14, if I remember correctly, and hasn't completed any of them. So there's a lot of unknowns about what the impact of this type of community is going to have. May be great. I'm not saying there's anything bad. I voted for it because it was within the law. And I've said it like in 2 other meetings, and I'll put it in the record for here, is that I'm not trying to make it different than a normal subdivision, but we have different concepts for TR, for NR, for single-family homes in a lot of different zoning areas. And that I think that, I recommend that the town look at what's going on maybe in other communities. Has anybody figured this out? Should we frame rental communities into a different zone versus NR?
I don't believe we can. I don't believe the state law allows us to restrict.
Well, I'm not saying restrict, I mean, this is a whole new concept, but I,
So just to follow up on what Nathan says, you cannot have any rules for rental communities that are different than any other. You can't differentiate between them. So in taking that concept, well, it makes sense to us to make the rules for single family the same as rental, and everybody's playing by the same rules.
Any more questions?
I mean, I had quite a few, but they've been answered since.
Okay. I actually have a couple questions for Jacob, if I could, please.
I will try my best.
So, perfect, thank you. So it was mentioned that similar language from other municipalities was discovered that helped guide this text amendment. Do you have any knowledge as to whether any of those municipalities have in the past or are currently facing any sort of legal challenges by adopting this change?
I'm not sure if they ever made changes or it was just always like that is my guess, but no, I don't know of any challenges to current language.
And I'd like to follow up on that. So it's standard across the state that single-family homes are on individual lots. So it's not like I think Charlotte was one. It's not like they adopted this law to prevent something like this to happen. That's just always been the law. And so, when we were going through this analysis, the question was, well, do other people do the same thing? And the answer was yes, and they have been for decades.
Do either of you, Jack, you can stay up there if you want. Do either of you foresee any legal exposure for the town of Huntersville based on that we're using this development as sort of the impetus for our adjustment? Does that create any sort of exposure for us?
No, not to my knowledge. And when Emily and I did review this language, which we did, we didn't see any issues with it either.
Okay.
I would just simply say, if you don't learn from what's going on and make adjustments, then you're going to be way behind the times. So this is just a learning. Something came across, we thought we could do better, and so that's what we're doing, and we wouldn't put our town into legal jeopardy for that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Scott, I think you said you had a motion?
Sure, thank you. The planning board recommends approval of TA 22-10, uses permitted on a multi-building lot. The text amendment is consistent with policy LU 11, LU 11.1, and LU 11.2 of the 2040 Huntersville Community Plan. It is reasonable in the public interest to amend the zoning ordinance because it will protect the unique character of the existing housing stock, is consistent with the definition of single-family home, and provide options for future transactions.
I will second that.
All right, thank you. Any discussion?
Just because I made the motion. I think the staff did a great job of making a simple text amendment that accomplishes what we want. And I would say our zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance has been fine-tuned over many, many years to give us what we all perceive as a good single-family development. And this just goes back and tries to make sure that anything that wants to look like a single-family development is going to feel like a single-family development and not have any kind of carve-out. So I think staff did a great job of identifying something and quickly adjusting to it, so thank you.
Yeah, I'll add to that. No disrespect to the hamlet if they're listening with the concept of a loophole. It really just identified an opportunity that we needed to fix it moving forward. I might have had some concerns about this if not for the exceptions for retirement communities and congregate care because they're kind of a different animal. And the one that came to mind was actually specifically outlined in the staff report with the Hope House, where there was 3 cottages that were added to the back of that facility to allow families in need to have a place to live. If we hadn't done that carve-out, something like that, that's very special, unique, couldn't exist. So I think staff weighed the right things, and the multi-building site plan was already an exception. We've now limited that exception to places that actually deserve it.
I was gonna say, I mean, I had some hesitancy. I mean, I don't want a product like this to be kind of, not, allowed in the future, like the math doesn't work, right? So that was gonna be my question, which Trina got to. So, I mean, I'm still on the fence because I feel like this is a good product for a lot of people, and we're just gonna turn it into a single family, which is gonna run the cost up. I feel like, I know Jack thinks it's even, but I'd say this is probably cheaper than a standard single-family neighborhood going all rental.
I've got, and I'm still struggling with this for a couple of things, not, a lot of what Chris just said, but I don't know, I feel like I would like to see more time on it myself before I made a decision on this, so that's why I'm really struggling. A question I had, now that I just thought about it, if this were called a retirement facility or age-restricted, could it be approved as shown here?
Yes, if it was a retirement community,
Not age-restricted, just retirement community, right?
an age-restricted.
Okay, so if they put 55 and up on the community and made it rental properties, they could do this?
Correct, yes, because we already have several of those.
That's a really great thing to drill into. What is the definition of retirement community? That's it, just a age restriction makes it a retirement?
Correct.
Okay.
What's an example that we have right now?
It's in your staff report, so.
But that's, well, yeah, but those are condoed out. Well, the Glens is, right?
So the Glens are not. The Glens are rental. So the third, you got 3 drawings here. The first 2 are the courtyard developments.
Yep,
Okay, those are condos. So those are owner occupied.
the Epcon products, right?
The third one are rentals. And then the fourth one is the cottages that we talked about at the Hope House, so the 3 little single-family units.
Right.
I just want to add that I initially was not excited about this addition, but after the discussion, I like that it protects some of these rental communities because I think it's something we need here. I don't think that there's a lot of families that can't afford a home, especially in Huntersville. And I don't want to chase those families away. So I like leveling the playing field for everybody in order to keep those projects viable.
I'm supportive of this motion, but I'm sitting here based on what I've heard and considering age-restricted, 55 and over, the thought and the question of could this subdivision have been presented as a 55 and over community, they wouldn't have been required to put property lines in, to plat it out. Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so it leads me to consider, should we amend this motion to include age-restricted retirement communities in this motion?
So basically, you mean just level it for everybody so that they're all the same.
So there's no loophole.
I think that would be a mistake because that would prevent the Hope House from happening.
No, you could leave the congregate.
Well, I'm sorry, she said level playing field for everybody. So, okay, so do we grant 1, 2, or no exceptions?
Well, I would leave the congregates out of it, but the example here is, I think Jack just gave us, was the EPCON communities, where the first time, they didn't have property lines, they had condominiums sitting on property that the owners of the facility owned, and they maintained it. Later on, they changed from that because I think, if I remember, Jack, if you correct me if I'm wrong, there were some issues, and for the future project that they had, they decided they needed to do this. And they turned it to rentals?
That's correct. So they were experiencing issues with the condo circumstances that they have in the 2 drawings we have here. So the third one they built on Eastfield Road, they just put on individual lots. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. So I'm not saying amend the motion right now, I'm saying consider, and I'm looking for feedback. Does that make sense?
Jack, can you explain why staff felt the need to exclude or to allow retirement communities to continue to have the exception?
Because we already had several, is our reasons for it. In the congregate, I understand what you're talking about is now just retirement, but we had some existing, so we felt like just leaving it like it is, it won't create any non-conforming situations. But as we said at the public hearing, if somebody recommends that be taken out, that's up to you. We recommend to leave it in there. We recommend to leave it in there for retirement and leave it in there for congregate care.
Jack, before you leave, from a staff perspective, again, I hate to keep pointing out the hamlet, but that's what's brought this up, is would you have supported the hamlet as it's laid out if it was 55 or over, or would you have still felt like that's not really conforming to what we, Huntersville, consider as a single-family development?
Yeah, I mean, we would, but I will tell you, David Pete here, could you get to the hamlet plan? I apologize for going back to this, but David struggled long and hard, and he can talk to this more than I can. In some cases, there's quite a distance of the parking lots from the houses that they serve. And I just don't think that that's going to serve a retirement community so well. So when you say, would this be a retirement, I mean, this could be approved, but I would dare say if that were the case, my thinking would be the parking 1.5, maybe 2 spaces per house would be at the door, that you do not have to walk a distance to get to your door. That just would not fit a retirement community. So I just offer that caveat that the design, I feel like, would have been different. David concurs with that. Because David worked long and hard to get the parking spaces as close as they're shown here.
And I think that's another reason I support the motion is, I don't know what this is going to look like when it's built out or 10 years later, but I have a feeling it's not going to look like other single-family subdivisions in Huntersville. Yes, it's going to act like one because there'll be single-family houses, but with the on-street parking and what you have here, it's just not going to feel like every other subdivision. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know, but.
All right, well, if no,
Can we put the text up there one more time?
And not to belabor any of that, but just to make sure that everybody understands. It took a very long time to pre-meet with the Hamlet folks to work through our ordinance, because Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, 6, 7, they all work together. And when you don't approach it in that first way, all the other pieces just don't line up. And so we weren't resisting what they were trying to do because the ordinance was allowing it. It was making everything else fit in a process that has stood the test of time, been around the block, been beaten up, been challenged. I mean, since 1996, this is the way we've done it. And anyway, the point being, when it was allowed, it was not simple. It would be very, challenging to replicate.
I would just ask, is it worth deferring? Is it worth you know, I'm not saying that plan is perfect, and that's, you know, I'm saying, are there other things that we want to include or think about? Because it does create a housing type that we don't have, and we need it. It creates, I'm gonna guess, an affordable product that we don't have. Are there other things that we can do, you know, aesthetically with the parking, with it doesn't have to be a subdivision, but I mean, it looks a lot like an apartment complex. You know, you've got parking lots, you got on-street parking, but you also have yards too. Anyway, that's where I'm really struggling with it.
But we're also kind of assuming that if they did build it to our current single-family ordinance, that it would be cost prohibitive. I don't know if we can make that decision. Jay's more educated than I am to do that, but I don't think that necessarily prevents this from happening, and yet it would still bring it up to what we, again, like David says, since 1996, we have vetted this single-family ordinance to get it to where I think everybody likes it, they see it. This is, all we're doing is say, we don't care if you want to sell it or rent it, you need to fit it into what we as a community define as a attractive single-family development. And that's all we're doing.
I'm just not sure that I understand why we need to make an exception for the retirement community. That's where I'm struggling. The Hope House, I get. The retirement community, I'm like.
Trina, would you like to ask for an amendment to the motion?
Sure, can we amend the motion to remove retirement community?
Scott, do you accept that amendment?
I think so. Give me a second. And that's when I first opened this up. We're like, why did we put this in there? And I just want to make sure we're not missing something, which I don't think we are by taking it out. So yes, I will accept removing that retirement community as part of the text amendment.
Stephen, where do you land on this?
Crud. I don't know. I feel like staff left it in there for a reason. And then retirement communities are a different animal. You've got different parking needs. You've got different numbers of automobiles. Aging populations don't always have the same number. I think it does create something that we might want to carve off exceptions for. Whereas if the only other difference is, well, this is a single-family neighborhood that people are going to own, so we want set of standards A, and this is an identical neighborhood, but we're going to rent them, we're going to hold them to standards B, I think that's a problem. But this, a neighborhood populated by all ages versus a neighborhood populated by 55 and up, I think that is a distinction worth keeping. So regretfully, I do not accept the amendment.
Trina, what this leaves as your option, you are welcome to propose a substitute motion if you choose. So you, basically, what you would want is the same essential motion that was read, but if I understand you correctly, you are looking to drop off the carve-out for retirement community.
I'm just wondering, and maybe I just don't have enough experience in a specifically retirement community, but I was part of, I helped manage 23 communities, more than that, in northern New Jersey where we had garden homes. So it was either standalone or duplex. And many of them were affordable housing. And they all looked the same. And I think that having that level playing field was, having them all look the same removes stigmas. I don't know. I don't really think that I understand why the retirement community has a specific need that shouldn't be. If we're saying, okay, we want everybody to look the same and act the same, you're all the same animal, why is it then that 55 and up, which, I'm like, gosh, I'm not that far. Like, I'm like 10 years from that, right? So, I mean, I'm like, how is my life in 10 years going to be so different that I should have the benefit of not, conforming?
I would say that, I don't know if it's based on a particular law or if it is just industry standard, but 55 and up, I mean, that is a very common,
Right.
like, cutoff.
Right.
And no, even with that, it's very different with the products that are available in Lake Norman. They look wildly different, but they are all 55 and up. So, no, you don't have to look forward 10 years, it's okay.
I wasn't laughing at your comment, I was laughing because I said, well, I'm 15 years past it.
And, which is why I turned. To me, what I hear you saying comes across actually as two different things. If we're going down, dancing on the line of the affordable housing path, I would say that's not what we're here to solve tonight. And as I've encouraged our commissioners in the past through numerous conversations, until the town actually agrees to define that in some fashion, the discussion to me is pointless because you don't know what you're going towards. So if we're discussing, well, this becomes an affordable housing type situation, well, I would disagree with that. I don't think that's what staff is trying to accomplish by this text amendment, and I don't think that's what we've been tasked to do. That said, there still is, I could see it being a separate issue where carving out the retirement thing. And so that's why I just offer you have that option to you if you would like to do a substitute motion. Or perhaps if someone else is on board.
And if she does it, there's still a.
Active motion on the table.
Or you, as the one who made the motion, could remake it, cut it out, and ask for a new second. I just, as the one who was the second, I would not. That too.
Or actually,
Ask for a deferral.
or does it actually still stand because he never, is my original motion still, that he second is still active, correct? Yeah. So that's really what's on the table. I'm not trying to say this, but
Yeah.
that is truly where we are. We have a valid motion.
The original one,
Yes,
yes.
the original one, which is leaving the,
No substitute motion
Correct.
has been made. No
And-
amendment has been accepted.
and I wish I had a really strong opinion on this because I would voice it. I don't. And Jay, I hear what you're saying, like, that, I want to make sure we get it right. I think we're getting it right. Let me ask you this. Do we have any active plans coming that, okay.
Yeah. So, well, unless someone is going to ask for another amendment or propose a substitute motion, then we have an active motion on the floor that we need to take a vote on. Go ahead.
Make a motion that we defer.
You can't have two motions on the floor at the same time. If I'm not correct, if I'm correct. Cannot be two motions on the floor at the same time.
That's,
No, he can,
the
substitute
There is a
motion,
valid motion on the floor.
no,
So you have the one motion on the floor. So officially, it's a substitute motion.
right. And we vote on the substitute motion first, and then we come back to the original.
That's correct.
That can be done, but you can't have two motions on the floor at the same time. That was my point.
It is a substitute motion that Jay
Yeah,
made.
that's different, but go for it.
I make a motion, that we defer the substitute motion that we defer for 30 days until the next planning board meeting to, I'm gonna need some help here. The purpose of a deferment would be to give a little bit of time for all of us to think this through, to think about alternatives, to think about other ways that we could make this, the product that we're looking for, or are we restricting age, the retirement facilities and the Congregate here or not. So it's really a deferment for 30 days to honestly just take more time to think it through.
Second.
And if I would, I think we have to be technical about this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do 30 days because our meeting comes before that. Our next meeting is October 25th. So if you'd like to word it that way.
Okay, now, in the process, does that mean that the town board will or will not hear this? If we defer it? Correct. Okay.
Correct.
So yes, to the.
Okay. And who, so you're with the date, you're good with the date instead, okay.
Correct.
All right, any discussion on the substitute motion?
What's our calendar look like? Do we have any idea? Yeah.
Next. Well, what I would say, even that may be the fact, but if this is what you guys want and believe in, then that's what we'll do it. So any discussion on the substitute?
I seconded it just because originally I was in line with Scott, and I fall back to staffs, they do this every day, so I trust their opinions and decisions much more than ours. But as we've kept discussing, it felt like there was 4 or 5 different opinions on this subject, and then Scott changed his motion. And so it just felt like there was more discussion that could be had. And I think it would benefit me personally to try to get a better understanding of the subject.
Is my time up?
No.
No. May I?
Yes.
I'm not opposed to deferral, but I just want to understand what we're trying to accomplish in the next 30 days and who's accomplishing it. Like, what are we asking the staff to do? The staff has come forward, this is what they've asked us. Do we just simply tell them, hey, you've heard our discussion, now will you come back with something different? That's all. I just want to be clear how we actually move the ball forward, other than delaying it 30 days.
Because what I hear is that the staff's not going to change it. This is what they recommend. This is what they want us to consider.
He mentioned that he could take some language out if we wanted.
Yeah, he was.
We're not going to change it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think where Nathan was coming from was, if this planning board recommended to take out the retirement homes, that's something we understood could possibly happen based on the feedback from the public hearing. So that's more along the lines. Our recommendation is our recommendation. We don't plan to do any more study or analysis. What I heard the motion was, it's for you guys to think through. And if that's the case, fine. What I would ask, though, is if you've got ideas, suggestions, questions, we need to have that so that we have time for the next meeting to try to answer those. But at this point in time, you have our recommendations. It's consistent with what the Ordinance Advisory Board recommended.
I'll support the original motion.
Ditto.
I have a quick question. Is there, you said something about garages, right? So if we go to the single family, keeping everything square, they have to add garages. Is there anything?
Have to add garages, the rear access, so that.
Just rear
Yeah,
access?
right. So you could put a parking lot back there, that's fine. You could
Oh,
have a
okay.
driveway back there. Yeah.
Is there anything else? Is there like an itemized list of what else changes if you say that has to match?
That's the issue, is when your lots are less than 50 feet wide, you need rear access.
Okay.
So that's.
But it could still be surface, like just parking on a,
Exactly, yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we cannot, as a community, regulate garages, not require anyways.
Okay.
I just make comment, I apologize for bringing up the, don't really apologize for it. But when I said discuss whether we should include single-family homes, because I didn't make a substitute motion or make an amendment. I think we had the discussion, and I think I've heard what I need to hear, and I will not vote to defer.
Okay, so substitute motion is on the table. Let's take a vote. All those in favor of the substitute motion as it stands?
To defer.
To defer, thank you. 1, 2, I'm sorry, I missed 3. All those opposed?
I'm trying to figure out where Jay's coming from. We want to make this affordable. What is going to drive up the cost so we don't defer? Like, right, let's get to the point of it, so we're not deferring it, so everybody's on the same page with voting.
I would argue you're not going to be able to answer the cost question.
Okay.
That's,
I mean, the garage was one of mine. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what else is adding to the cost of the property. I mean,
but there might be one person on this board that knows what asphalt costs per cubic foot or something, and that type of, I mean, I just don't think we have the purview to be able to do that.
Well, plus even in the hamlet, they had these little pods, mini parking lots that could have been reallocated and redesigned to go behind it. There's no way to know if that's going to be an up or a down. It's all about the design style and what the neighborhood looks like, in my opinion.
The market will adjust to the rules as it has.
When I get in these situations where it's not totally clear, I go back to the fact that we have an excellent staff that has Jack 42 years plus whatever else, and Jack doesn't take anything lightly. His staff doesn't take anything lightly. So if I feel like he's like, this works and this is what we need, and I don't have a clear reason not to, that's why I'll leave my motion the way it is, and I support what they proposed, and I would vote for that.
Okay. Yes.
no, I'll abstain. I was gonna ask Jay what his hesitancy was, like why he wants to
sorry.
think about it more. That's okay. It's fine. We voted, it's fine. It didn't pass.
So back to
So that, Tracy, that goes in as an affirmative, though. Okay. All right, the substitute motion did not pass. We are back to the original motion is on the floor. Do we need that reread, or do we know what it is? As stated. Scott, you good?
No, he did not second it, so it's back to what was originally proposed by the staff.
So as proposed by staff. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion passes 7-2. For other business, we have nothing on the agenda, so I will take a motion to adjourn. That's where someone would motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor? Any opposed to leaving? No? Motion adjourned.